Hello. Well, if you made it this far, well done. I thought I might conclude by just having a look at how everything fared then. So you've seen me make all these items over the last few days. In real life it took me a lot longer. Okay, let's have a quick look at all of these then and see what I would do better next time, because I do consider this whole set to be simply crude prototypes. Now I have the gist of how to make them. I'll go through them and I think I'll remake all of these, well, except the hook knife. Alright, let's start with the mug then. The thing I didn't realise that I was a bit naive about was assuming you just pick a branch and then turn it into a mug. Working into the end grains actually is slightly tricky, and it's particularly difficult to dry it out without it cracking. And sure enough, this piece of cherry has slightly cracked just there. Partly it was because it was the end grain, partly because I used wax rather than oil. We'll get to that. And possibly it dried out too fast as well, but yeah. On the plus side, I do like the shape of it, and it's ergonomic. It sits nicely. I'm always saying that, but it really does. And it holds beer, so yeah, it works. The rim has obviously got two different circles in it, so it's thinner here than it is here, and that's irritating. It might be a feature if I wanted it to look like that, but that wasn't really the plan. So I've learned also that the faceplate was a good idea, but it needed heftier screws, it needed a flatter surface to screw onto, and possibly, because what didn't occur to me at the time was screwing into end grain is always going to be a poor fixing. I mean, possibly what I should have done was make the wood, the piece of wood that I was using, flat with a planer, glue on a sheet of paper and then glue on the faceplate and then screw it, and I think that would have held it better. So yeah, lessons learned there, but overall still reasonably successful, and like I say, it does work. What was up next on the knife? So the knife, interesting about the knife was it was the piece, when I'd finished it, I was least impressed with out of the whole lot. But over time, I've really come to like this knife. It's actually very, very useful. Amazingly, just with that whittle tang, no glue or anything like that, it is still rock solid. It seems to be very strong. It's brilliant for carving and food preparation, and I'm sure if I was a Viking and I was into stabbing people, and this would do for that as well. I'm not going to test that for the time being. Annoyingly, after I'd made this knife, I then discovered my stash of yew, which is what I made Grandad's knife handle from. I'm very tempted to rehandle this with a piece of yew. I think I will do another one of these, but this was very successful, and it works nicely, and it feels very comfortable, and it works very well. So pleased with that. It's really grown on me actually. What's that next? The hook knife. Yeah, not much to say about this. It's the sort of thing that you don't use it every day, but when you need a hook knife's the thing you need, and it did the job admirably. So I've made 3 spoons so far, and I'm going to carry on making some. So I've made quite a few of these. I'm going to make some cooking spoons, and yeah, so this will get some more use. That worked a treat, and dead easy to make as well. The spoon then, I've yet to try this out. So I've tried out the mug, I've drunk a lot of ale from this. I've yet to try the spoons, so you'll see that in a minute. And likewise with the bowl. Now the issue with the bowl that I have is it was made from the worst possible piece of wood, but it was the only piece of wood that had the right dimensions to it. And the problem with this piece of wood is it's got a knot in it there. So whereas what I was trying to do was to turn a bowl using some cross-grained wood. So get a log, split it down the middle, and then turn from one of the sides rather than the end grain like the mug. So the whole advantage of that was when it dries, it'll stretch or warp rather in one direction, and otherwise hold together. So you'll have a slightly wonky bowl, but it will hold together. Now the problem with this, being with this knot in it, when it dries, who knows what's going to happen. It may just pull itself to bits. That's one of the reasons I've left it a bit thicker than I actually wanted it. We'll see. It also meant the grain going in funny directions like that meant that the cut wasn't very good on it, so the finish is fairly poor. Once this is sufficiently dry, I will remount it. If it survives the drying, like I say, I will remount it, return it, make it a bit thinner in the wall here, and sand it, and then oil it. Now, oiling is something I got pretty much wrong with with everything. I think with these tools, that was fine. I used beeswax on these, and the beeswax I like to use because its effect on steel. So you can see it's that black oxide which formed anyway. It kind of promotes that black oxide layer, which I like. This is my kitchen knife that I made months and months ago. And you can see here, this is from the same circular saw blade, and you can see there's no real rust on it, but it's got that black oxide layer again, and that was just treated with beeswax the one time in the handle and on the blade, and it's, yeah, so you get that patination on there. Where I fell down somewhat was using beeswax on this one and using olive oil on this one. The beeswax, I think, didn't penetrate well enough, and that may be part of the reason for this split occurring. So I then, because I only had boiled linseed oil, I used olive oil on this, because I figured olive oil is obviously edible, so it would be a safe, non-toxic thing to use on a spoon. But then I learned that olive oil can go rancid inside the wood, and yeah, so that's not a good thing. It hasn't seemed to have happened on this yet, but yeah, from what I read, that's a real possibility. The bowl here then hasn't got anything on it at all because I'm still drying this out. What I will do next time I go to the farm supplies, which I do, yeah, every month or so, what I'll do is buy a load of raw linseed oil, and it's sold at farm supplies as a food supplement. I think you give it to horses, so it's very cheap to buy it from there. Other sources can be ridiculously expensive for what it is. I thought it might be fun then to wrap up the series of the Vikings dinner set by actually having dinner with my dinner set. So I'm going to cook a stew, not a very Viking stew because it's going to have potatoes and tomatoes, which the Vikings obviously didn't have either of those. I'm going to have a beef stew. I'm also going to cook it in a completely inauthentic cooking vessel. So this is cast iron. The Vikings would have had something of wrought iron, so some kind of cauldron I suspect, hanging on a chain over a fire. I'm not going to do any of that. I'm going to cook it in here on the wood burning range. Sadly, almost nothing from the garden will go in the stew, except for some bay leaves. That's pretty much all I could find in the garden that would go in there. I've got a little bit of purple sprout and broccoli in the garden, but that's not really suitable for this. We've had that about 10 minutes. Potatoes, dead cow, tomatoes, and some local beer. Nearly forgot the contribution from the garden. Look how neatly it all packs together. So one thing I've discovered recently is that Vikings actually did have more pottery than I thought they did. But still, I think if you're going on an adventure, this seems far more practical than pottery, because it all just sits together like that and it's nice and tough. Anyway, the stew's been on the go for a good 6 hours. It smells great. embarrassed to say I didn't make the ladle. I will make a ladle. So today I was chopping down trees and doing the tree harvest because it's that time of year, and I was actually looking out for bits of wood that would lend themselves to branches with a kink in I could make a ladle out of. So an unfinished yes, unoiled bowl, definitely not advised. I forgot the ale. I got something dark, I think that's reasonably appropriate. And yes, I didn't make the ale either. It is on the list. We've got all the ingredients now for a big batch of Ironthumper ale, so that's something to look forward to. Well, for me anyway. It's holding together. But will the spoon work? It's probably a bit warm. God, that is a good stew. So your Viking on campaign obviously wouldn't have a table with him, and that's something I was trying to bear in mind when I made the bowl, so you can sit down and eat from it. This is bloody lovely. So I've no idea if they would have had beef and ale stew in the Viking times. They may well have done. I mean, they would have drank ale constantly, like all medieval people. They knew that ale was relatively safe compared to water, which was quite often pretty deadly. Well, there we go. The Viking dinner set in use. Like I say, these are all prototypes really. The knife and the bowl in particular, I think, should have a lot more decoration to make them more authentic. The copper collar would probably have rings punched into it with dots in the middle of the ring, something like that, even on a simple knife. And then there would have been some kind of inscription on the handle just to decorate it up a bit. This would probably have a bit more going on as well, I should imagine. And even the spoons would have like at least a little scroll carved in the end. But that's all for the future. One of the reasons I do this is just to demonstrate how easy it is really to have a go at something, and if you're not really sure what you're doing, or you know, you're muddling your way through like I was with all of this really, you can get there in the end. It's just going to take a bit of time. You know, the first spoon that I made took me hours and hours, and it wasn't a very good spoon. The second one was much quicker to do, and then the third one is really functional. Yeah, this just shows what you can do with a bit of patience and just a tiny bit of practicality, I suppose. The actual tools required are fairly minimal. So, see, I made the tools to make the spoon, but you could make a spoon with a penknife. You could make a hook knife or just buy a hook knife. I mean, they're not, I doubt if they're expensive. The stuff that I turned, yeah, I used a lathe, but you don't have to use a lathe, or you could buy a lathe. They're very cheap. It's a great thing to have. It's good fun. It really is good fun wood turning. It takes hardly any effort, and you can blast through the stuff. It's great. Yeah, especially compared to forging, which actually takes some, takes some work. So yeah, lathes are not expensive second hand. I really don't think so. But alternatively, you could make a lathe. If you have a power drill and some other bits and bobs, you've got the makings of a lathe there. Failing that, you could just make a pole lathe. I mean, this is the great thing about pole lathes. I mean, I know I'm not, you know, the pole lathe's biggest fan, but you can go out into the woods with just a bit of string and a couple of steel centres and a chisel, and you can make yourself a pole lathe. You know, there's really not a lot to it. People have been making pole lathes for thousands of years, so you know, what's our excuse? Anyway, that's my attempt at a pep talk. I'm very happy with all this. As crude as it is, I'm very happy with it all, and I look forward to making much better ones in the future. But for now, that's that. I'll get back to my meal and I'll see you on the next project. Cheers. No, I mean, cheers.